Joining us is business professor and Bank of America Dean Emeritus at the University of California, Berkeley, Ann Harrison. Welcome, Ann, and let's get right to it. Let's talk right from the beginning. Why has Congress given so much tariff power to the executive branch over time?
Thanks, John. Thanks for this opportunity to be here. In emergency situations and when the country needs to act quickly, it's important for the president to be able to use emergency powers to protect the country. During a pandemic, for example, if you need to import masks quickly. So generally, the power resides with Congress. Remember, we were created as a nation, no taxation without representation. That's in the Constitution. But in an emergency, the president may need to act quickly.
So it seems like it does give the president a lot more power. And I wonder, as a former member of Congress, why we just don't hold Congress's feet to the fire and have them just react more quickly. Why can't we do that?
Well, that's a really great question. But as you know yourself, Congress, it's hard to act quickly, especially when a lot of trade agreements require negotiations with many countries. And we are rule bound by the WTO. We can't just do anything quickly. I should say, though, that we actually haven't ceded that much power to the president. Our current president has just taken it. And in fact, that's such a unusual development that it's been challenged in court, and the Supreme Court will hear the case in early November.
So briefly, what do you mean when you say you think he's taken too much power?
Well, remember, a tariff is a tax, right? And in America, there's no taxation without congressional approval. So these acts that have been passed that allow the president to use his authority are very narrow. They're under specific emergency situations. If there's a surge in imports, if our national security is threatened. What our president has done first in April and then in August is he's enacted very large ranging flat tariffs across many countries. It's hard to imagine we have an emergency situation with Vietnam, for example. So the way that the president has enacted these tariffs is not in the spirit of all these emergency powers. At least that's what critics say.
He went outside the scope of his authority, and that's what the Supreme Court's going to have to decide. Even though Congress has given him authority, he's gone too far. Is that basically going to be the issue?
That seems to be the issue, yes. I mean, is it an emergency that justifies across the board tariffs against many countries? Not clear. The other issue, of course, is that these tariffs are against our previous agreements with all these countries. So they're in violation of our membership in the World Trade Organization, which organizes rules with the rest of the world.
So what can Congress do to be even more involved? Let's say changing the course entirely on tariff policy.
Well, Congress could, but it would require probably a 2/3 agreement. Congress could override the agreement that's been made or enact a rule saying that when there are broad-based agreements that aren't clearly an emergency, Congress needs to approve those.
Okay, so let's take a step back for a second. A tariff itself, you said it's a tax, but it really is a tariff or a tax on incoming products. So therefore, you're saying it's a tax on Americans because it raises the prices and Americans have to pay those higher prices, basically, right?
Right, that's right. So exactly. So right now, tariffs are the highest they've been since 1935. They're on 17%. So if you import $1 worth of goods from anywhere in the world, it's going to cost $1.17 in the United States, and somebody has to pay that 17 cents. It could be the importer. Often it's the consumer.
No, but we're looking at the economic factors right now, and the president has imposed a whole slew of tariffs. And one of the things that's interesting to me is that inflation hasn't jumped. It's ticked up a little bit, but it hasn't jumped. It's still less than 3% overall. So are the costs getting passed on, and is it really having that big an effect on American consumers?
That's a great question, John. So what the Yale Budget Lab estimates is that because of these tariffs, prices have gone up almost 2%. So that's most of the inflation that we're seeing. The reason it's not higher with an increase in tariffs of to 17% is because in our country, imports only account for about 15% of GDP. So that's why it's not bigger. It's because we're not a heavily import dependent country. But 2% is big. That translates to several $1,000s a year for each consumer in the United States.
So let's look at the other side of the coin. We've talked about what happens domestically, but what happens to our trading partners when we have tariffs imposed that, in the way, especially the way the president's imposed tariffs this time, it seems like some of our traditional trading partners are not too happy with us. How does that affect the relationship with other countries?
Quite frankly, it's really destroyed our relationship with other countries. In particular, our closest trading partners, Mexico and Canada, are really quite upset with us. For a country like Canada or a country like Mexico, where I just told you that our trade is only 15% of GDP, for those countries, it's more like 30 or 40% of GDP. So it's a huge hit on these countries in the short run, and it's really, it's very painful for them, much more painful for them than it is for us.
So what about India, for an example? It seems like we have some very significant tariffs on India. And what effect is that having on our relationship with India as a case study?
So India is not happy either. Remember, a lot of in the last 100 years, poverty in the world has been cut in half. So many fewer people live on less than $2 a day. There's evidence that suggests that a lot of that reduction in global poverty happened because those countries were able to export to the rest of the world. So when we cut off India's opportunity to export with these very high tariffs on India, we're basically cutting off their opportunities to grow themselves out of poverty. And that's very concerning and also very destabilizing for the world.
So what about the other side of that argument? And that is, why should other countries have tariffs on our goods, or why should other countries have open borders that flood people in our country like Mexico does? Shouldn't we have tariffs and use that as a tool to kind of fight back against the unfair trade balances or unfair things happening on our borders?
That's a really great question, John. It's certainly true that there is a very important segment of America that's been hurt by import competition. So 40 years ago, 1 in 4 workers in the US were manufacturing workers, and those are good jobs. Now it's only 1 in 10 workers. And it's also true that all these measures we've taken since 2015 has slowed manufacturing decline. We're now keeping steady instead of losing our share of manufacturing. That's a good thing. But what most economists would tell you is that using tariffs to resurrect US manufacturing, to bring manufacturing back to the US, is the worst form possible.
Ann, thanks so much for your keen insight.